Mark, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining me today for what I hope will be both a respite and a moment of instruction as we move through times that are both difficult and promising. Difficult because being Jewish can sometimes be challenging, and in these days, the challenges are many. Promising because we're moving into and through a period of maximal joy and promise from Purim toward Pesach, and have an unparalleled opportunity, as Mark noted, to really work on tikkun midot, on adjusting, refining, elevating our character traits. Along those lines, the meditation that I'd like to lead you in today, and that I'm going to preface with a little bit of Torah study, has to do with clearing the decks in a way, understanding the difference between witness consciousness and the self, and seeing this through the lens of this week's Torah portion, Parshat Tzav, in the book of Leviticus. Begins with chapter 6, verse 1. Before we look at the text with Jordan's help, I just want to lay some groundwork for what we're going to be thinking about as we look at the text and what we're going to be sitting with as we meditate. From the moment we open our eyes in the morning, we are judging, calculating, measuring, and weighing, and determining our place in the world. We are thinking about what we come across, and we think of this thinking self as the true self. And as a result, we are in a way addicted to our minds. We think that our minds are ourselves. But sometimes we can delve into a deeper aspect of self and a deeper awareness of existence and the miracle that is existence by asking the simple question over and over again, who is it that is seeing? Who is it that is thinking? Who is it that is feeling the hot and the cold? Who is registering all this? A means of peace can be gathered even from texts to which our sensibilities aren't highly trained. Texts like we find in the entire book of Leviticus, which is really a priestly manual for how to conduct a series of rituals, including animal sacrifice. So the question is, what can we learn from animal sacrifice and the rituals attendant thereon about witness consciousness? How can we elevate our awareness that even in these physically demanding, sometimes grisly rituals, we find deep parallels for personal growth and awareness of the miracle of existence from moment to moment? Let's take a look at the text and see sort of what I'm talking about, and then we'll move into the meditation. So Jordan, if you can pull up the sheet and help us all see and share this. And if you can scroll down just a little bit, there we go. Yep, perfect. So this is the beginning of the sixth chapter of Leviticus. Scroll up just a little so I can see that first line. There we go. So it begins, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, Tzav et Aharon ve'et banav lemor, Zot Torat ha'olah hi ha'olah. It starts with a command. God speaks to Moses, tells Moses to command Aaron and Aaron's sons about a specific type of offering, the burnt offering. And what we learn about the burnt offering is it's got to be burned entirely. And the next thing we learn, starting with verse 3, is that the priest, dressed in the priestly garments, has to clean up. So clean up is not just a custodial job here, it's an elevated job. First of all, the fire needs to be burning all night. Second of all, the first thing the priest has to do in the morning is to dress in linen raiment and take the ashes and place them beside the altar, essentially clean off the altar, And then he's got to take the ashes to a pure place. If we could scroll down a little bit more, Jordan, to verse 6. So this part of the instructions ends with, Eish tamid tukad al hamizbeach lo tichve. A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. This is, we're reminded of this when we see the Ner Tamid in the synagogue, which also speaks to the divine presence over the Mishkan. But the idea of a fire that never goes out is really the idea, the image of our consciousness. What the priests are doing is a physical correlate to what we do every moment of our lives, which is keep the fire burning and sweep the ashes away. And we're to do it as a priestly endeavor, not as a custodial endeavor. Keep the fire lit, sweep the ashes away. If we can scroll down a little bit more, Jordan, to this next teaching. This is Rabbi Aaron Lieb Smokler, who talks about retaining the remnants, in other words, the importance of the ashes. A little bit more so we can see the beginning of the next paragraph. There we go. So the ashes built up and overwhelmingly, and then the priest takes them away in the ritualized act known as terumat hadeshen. In other words, this is the second paragraph. I hope if you can read along with me, please do. The fire that burns inside of a person alive with religious fervor has a tremendous capacity to consume alien thoughts. In other words, your witness consciousness is uniquely qualified to burn away the thoughts that plague you. So the act of terumat hadeshen, of shoveling the detritus of fiery consumption from the center of the altar to its sides, reminds us that the light does not and need not make darkness disappear. Why am I reading you all this? What does all this mean? It means, first of all, that when we meditate, we are returning our focus to the fire that never stops burning, the fire of our consciousness. Second of all, the sweeping away of the ashes, of the thoughts that burn up, the material that burn up in the fire, are not alien, aren't icky, aren't contaminated. They're a necessary part of living. When we meditate, when our thoughts intrude upon us, that is a holy moment. And moving them to the side in meditation is a holy and elevating act. Thank you, Jordan. I think we'll stop the text study for now and we'll move into the meditation. For the meditation, I want you to think about this. I have a grizzled beard, so it's a little hard to see, but right here, where there's a little bit of brown hair between the gray, right here beneath the center of the nose, is a place called the philtrum. We all have it. Nobody's sure exactly why we have it. It could be that it's spare skin so that when our mouths moves in different ways to make different sounds, the skin can accommodate the movements of the lips. But in Jewish mysticism, this is a sacred place on the face. In Midrash Tanhuma, it talks about an angel, a female angel named Lila, whose job is to teach the fetus in the womb all of Torah and shows the fetus the whole world from one end to the other. And right before the moment of birth, Lila touches the emerging infant on the lips. Some people say the child is smacked across the face. I prefer the gentler image. And that being touched here removes the knowledge of Torah, which must be regained as the person moves through the world. What is this place for the purpose of our meditation? It is the place where oxygen is fed into the holy fire of consciousness and where the heat of the fire emerges from the holy fire of consciousness. So in this meditation, we're going to be focusing on the breath as the fire of consciousness. The thoughts that come up will be the ashes that we sweep aside as the priests of our own life. And this simple meditation may be revelatory to you. It may be difficult. You may sit and think the entire time. That's okay. It is the spiritual work of cleaning the fire of consciousness and turning to the essential witness that lives with us every moment, within us, is us, defines us, prior to thought and judgment and evaluation, the essence of being human. So please take a comfortable seat. And if you can, find the posture that gives you the least amount of physical discomfort, that does the most to alleviate whatever pains or ailments you have, and that to the maximum extent relies on physical balance. That is, you are neither leaning left nor right, if that's possible. You're sitting erect to the maximum extent possible. You close your eyes or keep them just softly opened and unfocused. And you turn your attention to the philtrum, that place above the center of the upper lip and beneath the nose, the place where the angel Lila has touched you after instructing you in all of Torah and showing you the world from one end to the other. And as you turn your focus to the breath, you rest your consciousness here and understand that with each in-breath, you are lighting the fire of consciousness, keeping the fire of life burning. And that with each exhalation, you are removing the ashes. That is, the ashes of oxygen that's been used up. As you exhale, you remove the ashes of extraneous thoughts. And you let witness consciousness emerge. That deepest part of the self that is with you from beginning to end, which does not judge, but merely sees. as we move into the last couple of minutes of this meditation. Breathe more deeply, both at the inhale and the exhale, and pause with full lungs and again with empty lungs. Let the inhale fill you with witness consciousness, with merely being, and the exhale sweep away the ashes of your thoughts. In this way, you're not punishing yourself for thinking. You're just clearing the altar of your existence. And as we conclude the meditation, take one more deep breath and one more deep exhale to clear the last of the ashes from the altar of consciousness. And slowly come back to this electronic gathering. Collect yourself and open your eyes. And remember that this meditation, this time in the Jewish calendar, this book of the Torah, all are propitious for opening our awareness to the essence of our being, which is prior to mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, for that really brilliant, beautiful teaching and practice. And we seal it as we do each day, offering those of you who are in mourning, if you're observing a yard site, opportunity to recite Kaddish if it's your custom to participate. Please do so. You can put the name or names of those you're honoring in the chat now or after you recite Kaddish. And if you're not among those reciting Kaddish, please stay present to help create a minyan of comfort and support for those who are. And if you are reciting Kaddish, please join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yikadal, Mikadash, Shemei Rabbah, Divrach, Yimei, Kaye Kon, Yomei Kon, Kaye Defol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Bizman Kariv, Amru, Amen. Hey Shmei Rabba Barach, Olam Lamei Hamayah, Barach, Kavach, Ka'ar, Yitzchak, Yitadar, Yitaled, Yitzchak, Ela min kol birchata v'shirata v'shbechata v'nechemata ba'amiran ba'alma min ish lamach rabba bin Shemaya Chaim Aleinu Yisrael v'Yamru Chaim Aseh Shalom B'Rucha Aseh Shalom B'Yom V'Yachol Yisrael V'Al Kol Yoshei El Amru
Amen. Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'Yamru. Amen.
Amen.
Friends, thanks so much for joining us today. May those who are in mourning, and David, I want to include you in wishing you consolation and comfort on the loss of your mother, as we offer comfort as well to all those who mourn who are here and those who mourn everywhere. Thanks to Jordan Pollock for holding our space today, tech space today, as always, beautifully. Thanks to each of you for being here, and everyone is always is welcome to either stay on and continue to sit with that beautiful practice. If you'd like, you can turn the sound off on your device and just use the container of this community to continue to sit, or you can join us for a conversation with Dr. David Gottlieb about today's teaching and the practice, or just to share reflections on your experience with it today in the chat. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat and preface it by writing question in caps, and help me keep an eye out for the questions. Yeah, David, that was really an I would say extraordinary. Thank you so much for that. Just beautiful. It's fun to schmooze with you too, as we did on the podcast last week. So I'd like to review the teaching just so we can reiterate it and be clear on it. You spoke about, and this was such an important part of this, why we do this practice is, first of all, remembering we are not our thoughts. We are not our mind. There's more to us. And there were, I guess, different ways of expressing that, but consciousness, awareness, the pre-mind that's expressed in that midrash in Tanchuma, which, by the way, I'm just going to put the link to that. It's a wild midrash if you want to read about it. It's a long description about what's going on in there in the womb. But it basically, the connection between that midrash and we were teaching was that we have actually had an embodied experience of awareness of being able to see from one end of the universe to the other, right? And then we come into the world, and the world of differentiation. So those two kinds of, oh, sorry, you're muted, David.
Which is another way of saying that embodied experience is prior to thought, right? That our embodied experience in some ways is primary.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly in Parshat Tzav, God is not telling the priests what to think. He's telling them what to physically do. Mm-hmm. I think in the world generally, and in the West particularly, we are addicted to mind, and it tends to block the purity of our experience of being conscious beings in a physical container. And so the philtrum, this part of the lip is a reminder, a mnemonic device, as well as a physical embodied place in our being that can remind us to return the attention to breath as a way of being right on and in front of the altar of experience. Part of us needs to burn up, right? That's how we renew ourselves. Cells die and are reborn, and in the same way, thoughts should come and go. And all of this passes before the witness who, that wild midrash, as you said, experienced the world from beginning to end in the womb, and who
Mhm.
must return to that kind of universal awareness every time an opportunity arises.
Yeah. There's so many, in some ways it sounds so simple, right? But and there are different ways of expressing it. I think, another way of expressing that is that that's the kind of consciousness that we're meant to cultivate on Shabbat when we step, kind of in a way, step back into the womb, I think,
Exactly.
and have that kind of awareness. But we live in the world, and I loved actually didn't know the name of this, the philtrum. Um, I don't know what the origin of that is. I guess it's a Latin thing, but I like the idea of it being I associated with filter. I was thinking about it as kind of
Yeah.
a filter, filtering, thoughts and the detritus of the mind through that, and focusing on the inhalation as cultivating that consciousness, feeding the fire, in keeping with the Torah portion, and then the exhalation as sweeping the ashes to the side. It's such a great. I want to go back actually to the text in a minute, but there is a question from Mir, who says, and this is a good practical question for meditation. She writes, sometimes when I meditate, a new idea or inspiration arises about a step or action I can take to address a task. If I try to sweep it aside, it keeps coming back out of concern that I'll forget it. But if I quickly jot it down and assure myself that I documented it, I can sweep it aside. So what do you think about that? What's
I
your,
think that's legit. I mean, I think if all sorts of things arise in meditation, and the sweeping aside doesn't mean discarding as much as it means moving it aside so you can return to the basic aspect of consciousness. But if something comes up that's useful, save it.
Mhm.
The key moment, as many people here I'm sure have experienced or learned about meditation, is not uh, a blissful emptiness, although that can be nice, certainly. But the key moment is being aware that your thoughts have run away from you and to return to the base of consciousness. If
Mhm.
you are a creative person, if you're engaged in a task or a large project, you've probably had the experience of having breakthrough ideas about that project exactly when you're not thinking or working on it. And so, is it sort of legit? Is it kosher, as it were, to just keep a pad next to you? 100%, in my view.
Mhm. Another question, like the midrash, in some sense, is problematic. Um, and Tish is asking the question. I've always understood that in Judaism, life is not considered to begin until the first breath is taken, which is why the mother's life comes before the fetus when necessary, which is, of course, the basis for why abortion is considered essential in Jewish tradition. How does the square of this midrash? If life has not yet begun, then how can the fetus be taught all the Torah, or see from one end of the universe to the other?
I mean, I would just say that one has to make a distinction between life and consciousness. Consciousness is something that sees from one end of the world to the other, that exists, or that we can think of as existing, as outside of time. It is not beholden to the aches and pains and the mortality of embodied existence, but it lives within that. So
Mhm.
we have to make a distinction for the purposes of this kind of meditation and for the purposes of this uh, interpretation of this text, of distinguishing between life and consciousness. The two exist in union, but are not necessarily and not always the same thing.
Right. And we might say in the same way that the idea of the soul surviving this world, right, of that conscious, whether you think about it as consciousness or spirit, is not the same as living in this world of differentiation. And maybe that the life begins in this world when we enter into this world of differentiation, when we forget, which is another way of also like lifting up that mindfulness meditation is. And our mutual friend Sam Feinsmith and Rabbi Jordan Ben Appel lift this up a lot, that we can think about the practice as the hira, as a remembrance.
Exactly.
We're remembering something that we already know on some level. It's not like we're trying to convince ourselves of something, like we know
No,
what that is.
that's a great
Mike,
insight.
And I'm not a developmental psychologist either. Maybe somebody here is, but I understand at least that in the, after an infant is born too, there isn't yet that sense of differentiation, right?
That's right. That's
Right.
right.
There's
Yeah, I
object
think that's a
permanence that
great
doesn't
insight.
happen till later.
Right. And I would also remind all of us that, you know, uh, just asking the question, well, Judaism says this about life. How does that score, but we don't really exist in life until we take the first breath. I mean, that is already the judging mind returning to the place of trying to see this text outside of the judging mind. In other words,
Mhm.
the person wants to know, and I think this is legitimate. I don't mean to cast aspersions on the question. I think it's an excellent question. But to step behind the question, the Midrash is teaching us creative ways to think about the story of existence,
Mhm.
of the line of existence. And we have to step outside our judging mind to appreciate the many different ways that that story can be told and understood. So to look at it sort of from a halachic standpoint is one legitimate way to look at it, but another might be to say, what is this story to come to teach me in this moment?
Mhm. Let's take a look together at the end of that Aaron Leib Smokler text, because I highlighted a couple of phrases here. You got to some of this, but we went into the meditation. Just a way of, again, reiterating the essence of the teaching. She writes, our parsha instructs the Kohen, the priest, every single morning, first thing in the morning, to move the scorched ashes of the burned up animals to the side of the altar. That's the ritual.
Yep,
Just a great description of daily spiritual practice. Right?
exactly.
Take the trash out.
Exactly.
And then I just highlighted this. This is so beautifully written. It feels like it's worth us seeing it together. The fire that burns inside of a person alive with religious fervor. I want to invite you to translate that a little bit into some mindfulness seeds here.
Mhm.
Has a capacity to consume, quote, alien thoughts, doubts, fears, regrets that get in the way of piety. I just want to, that's kind of very kind of, that's a pious terminology there. So can you translate that for someone who says,
Yeah,
like, what do you mean religious fervor? What does that mean?
I think what Rabbi Smokler is referring to here is a particularly Hasidic take on
Mm-hmm.
the on Parshat Tzav and on the book of Leviticus, who the Hasidic masters saw in these verses, excuse me, the notion that the fire that's burning within us has to be religious fervor. It's the desire for dvekut, for
Mm-hmm.
cleaving to God. That
Mm-hmm.
has to be tended to, and anything that's in its way gets swept off the altar of daily life. Because and that is piety, right?
Right.
Is Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. I keep God before me always, as the Psalm
Mm-hmm.
says. So translating this into sort of uh, uh, mindfulness, a mindfulness framework would be to say that the fire that burns inside of someone, the fire of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
um, can can move us to a place eventually where we are not captive to our thoughts, where we see them coming and going. We don't shut them down. We don't resist them with, Superman type strength.
Right.
We understand them as part of our organic experience of living. We let
Right.
them come and we let them go, and we don't let that get in the way of consciousness.
Right. That's a good segue into the next paragraph, where basically what she's saying is that this is a teaching that we need to honor those parts of ourselves, those thoughts, right? The light does not
So
and need
important.
not make darkness disappear. It merely moves from center stage to a more peripheral place and then honors it there. Our
Exactly.
hearts too must learn to contain and retain light and darkness.
I think that's such a beautiful insight of hers.
It
I think
is.
it's so important to realize, if I think these things, I'm meditating badly, or I think this way, therefore I'm not a yogi or a Buddha, or a sage. Um, these things are part of the process of living. The darkness is what helps the light shine more brightly. It's like Leonard Cohen says, right? There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. But the darkness is necessary in order for us to experience that. It's all part of the experience. But the light keeps radiating from the center. And to the extent we can return to that, we can liberate ourselves and more fully serve the moment and serve others.
This was really beautiful, David. Thank you so much.
It was my
Um,
honor and pleasure.
I want to give one more plug for David and Moji Silver's podcast, which I put in the chat. And a shout out to Jordan for holding our space together, each of you for being here. Your incredible dedication to this community of practice. And David, thanks so much for this and the other contributions you've made to building this community as well. And kol hakavod, beautiful teaching today.
It was
All right,
honor.
everybody. We look forward to seeing tomorrow. Tomorrow will be led by Rabbi Dr. Mira Neshama Weil, be joining us from Jerusalem. And we very much look forward to that. So we hope to see you tomorrow. In the meantime, be safe and well. Many blessings, everyone.